We recognize that the Hogan Administrative Center occupies the land of the Ho-Chunk people. Please take a moment to celebrate and honor this ancestral Ho-Chunk land and the sacred lands of all Indigenous peoples. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Alberts?
Here.
Mr. Bagneski?
Here.
Ms. Berkedal? Here. Dr. Garcia?
Here.
Dr. Jimenez?
Here.
Mr. Manka?
Here.
Mr. Newmeister?
Here.
Dr. Sprague?
Here.
Ms. Sukla? Here.
A quorum of the Board of Education is present, so the regularly scheduled meeting of November 18th, 2024 is called to order, and we'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and face the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So tonight's agenda has previously been distributed to the board, and I would entertain at this time a motion with a second to approve the agenda as submitted, unless there's a motion to amend, with the reminder that this regular meeting will end at 8 p.m. in order to move into closed session. So at the maximum, we will be in this regular meeting until 8. So is there a motion and a second?
A motion to accept the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Dr. Sprague, seconded by Dr. Garcia, to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion has carried, and we do not have any public speakers this evening, and I'll ask for the board's flexibility. We're going to do the recognitions first prior to the school showcase, and so I'll turn it over to Dr. Engel.
Excellent. So the Wisconsin Association of School Boards has a business honor roll opportunity every year. And we're invited, the school board's invited to submit up to 5 names of local businesses each year to recognize for their contributions to our school district. It could be any number of ways, but we wanted to highlight 5 businesses this year that have really made a difference for the school district of La Crosse and that we find as valuable partners in a variety of ways. And so I'm going to read the nomination that we submitted for each, and then after each, Dr. Juan Jimenez will present a certificate, and we'd invite our business partners to say a few words if you're so inclined, either about your business or our partnership, whatever moves you. So first is CNC Machine. CNC Machine is a constant supporter of our architectural and construction education programs, with their team members providing amazing job shadow opportunities and donating their time to school-based activities where they share opportunities to improve pathway opportunities for our students. They have also become a strong youth apprenticeship employer, working tirelessly to create opportunities for students within the fabrication and machining industries. Thank you so much, CNC Machine. We invite you up, and Dr. Jimenez has a...
Not sure I wanted to go first, but thank you. I would say the last youth apprentice I had, he now is at Western. He still works for me part-time, and he's about coming up on school break. He works full-time during break, and he will be hired full-time with us. He was like the perfect candidate. When he first came, he really didn't know a lot, and now he was at the top of his class. He's bragging, so it's working out really well. He wasn't our first youth apprentice, but I do offer that even to Aquinas schools, West Salem, Holman, Onalaska, so I normally have at least 1 or 2 apprentices. So we've been around in La Crosse for 52 years, and plan to still be here, but thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Next is Courtesy Corporation. The Courtesy Corporation partnership with the School District of La Crosse is a key component to the successful career pathway opportunities that we provide to our students and the community. They provide tours and donate time to share their skill sets and expertise with a broad variety of career pathway areas. Courtesy Corporation has also been a youth apprenticeship employer over the past year with multiple career pathways. Congratulations, Courtesy Corp.
Thanks for having us, and thanks again for the honor. Courtesy Corporation is a McDonald's owner-operator. We are local here in the La Crosse area, owning those 64 McDonald's restaurants throughout western Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. Proud to have all the ownership of the La Crosse area, Holman and Onalaska restaurants. We're proud of the partnership that we have with the La Crosse area schools. We want to thank educators, of course, for all that they do each and every day with the students. It is, though, truly wonderful to see the students that can balance school and work and what a part-time job can really do to complement their education. Helping develop those work ethics and what we also kind of refer to as those soft skills like teamwork, communication, initiative, those types of things. Those are just a few things that Jared and his team do at the Losey Boulevard restaurant. Each and every day they're involved in those kids just like the educators, and we thank you. And again, thank you for the honor. We appreciate it.
I was talking to a student just the other day who was talking about transitioning into management as a 17-year-old. Wild. Next is People's Food Co-op. People's Food Co-op has partnered with the School District of La Crosse to provide leadership, instruction, and a vital connection to the business and industry in our school district. The co-op team members have also donated time to assist in student projects, to become a proud youth apprentice employer, have presented to students, and have committed to partnering with the School District of La Crosse in continued opportunities to support academic and curricular experiences. Thank you to the People's Food Co-op. I think they couldn't make it here tonight, so we will give them their certificate later. Next is Schneider Heating and Air Conditioning. Schneider has been a standout youth apprenticeship employer, which allows high school students the opportunity to learn on-site with a business as they seek continued learning experiences within their chosen pathway. They have supported the growth of our students and built robust opportunities along the way for continued learning within the architectural and construction pathway. Congratulations, Schneider Heating and Air Conditioning.
I'll just echo what they said. Appreciate the recognition, and we owe a lot to our community. We've been around for coming up on 90 years now. We want to be good stewards of that, and send your youth to us if they're interested in the trades or anything else. We'd be happy to have them job shout or ride along. Thank you.
Thank you. And our fifth business to recognize is Viaro. Viaro is a new and exceptional partner to the School District of La Crosse within their first year of business. Their mission of providing whole-person health care through primary care and wellness services has been a model for their approach to partnership within this K-12 setting. Viaro has embodied partnership in fostering education and overall wellness for all who live in the La Crosse region through their continued generosity, willingness to mentor, and to work together in finding creative ways to solve challenges. We are grateful to Viaro for putting our students and families of the School District of La Crosse as their top priority. Thank you to Viaro.
Thank you very much. It's first year being with you guys. It's actually my first year as a manager at VRO as well, so it's been a really rewarding experience. I have my exercise science degree, and I see the Health Science Academy and talk to these students and see how driven and focused they are. I'm so impressed, and I'm just thinking, man, why didn't they have something like that for me when I was in school? It took me a few more years to figure out my direction and fitness, and it was just me working out with the buddies back in high school, and we never had any other direction other than that. So, like I say, it's been really impressive. These kids have come in, they work hard, they're there every Tuesday mornings. I've been able to kind of take a look at their SMART goals they made, give them some feedback, and it feels like we've been really helpful. So we look forward to the continued partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank all of the businesses for being here tonight. We also recognize that you might have other obligations, and you are welcome to stay for our school board meeting, but we also understand that if you want to leave, now would be a great opportunity to do so.
Mr. President, I have a question. First of all, thank you for the very worthy awardees tonight. And it reminds me of looking at the linkage notes. One of the groups that had the linkage talked about how one of the things they're proud about this district is that we aren't just focused on college ready, but college and career ready, and this is just a good demonstration of it. My question is procedural. If this is for the Wisconsin School Board Association, how is the school board approving these, or what's the process for that?
Yeah, annually, we solicit the school board for any nominations that they might have. And if we don't quite get to the 5, then we reach out to our school district administrators and find recommendations from there to make sure that we honor folks each year. And so next year, we'll have another opportunity for school board members to identify folks, just like we did this year.
Thanks for the question. We're going to move back in our agenda to the school showcase, and we have a presentation regarding school safety, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Engel to introduce our presenters. Excuse me.
Yeah, so we like to do showcases, and school safety is one of those areas that we thought we would try and highlight some positive things going on in our school district. And so I invite Ann Endress, our safety coordinator, up to be our primary presenter, but also Ami Zabrowski and Kurt Teff are here to support Ann in our efforts as well. Ami is our Director of Student Services, and Kurt Teff is our Director of Community Services. And so thankful all of Ann's work and attention on this issue.
Thank you. The purpose of school safety is to reduce risk and accidents for all 7,028 students and staff in our district. And we do this from end to end, all the way from the skinned knee on the playground to a train car derailing at Logan or Central High School. We train bloodborne pathogen training. Whoops, let me do that. How come it's not advancing?
We'll get her figured out.
Technology is great when it works.
Yep.
Where is the closed session? No, it's
It's on the adjournment.
adjournment. I didn't see that. That's not, but it doesn't.
It's there.
Give out, no.
It's there.
Is that the? Oh, yeah. Oh. Oh, there it is. All right. Just didn't show up how it usually does.
It's there.
So yeah, it's posted with the agenda. At least 24 hours in advance or whatever.
There we go. Sorry about that, folks.
Thank you.
We train, getting back to we train bloodborne pathogens. We also do OSHA compliance training as well as CPR training. We also have policies and procedures and train for, like I said, train car derailment. We have medical response teams in the school, both health assistants and nurses. We do school preparedness training, physical plant trainings, for slips, trips, and falls. The school district also has a district safety committee, district safety meeting. It meets quarterly, and we have representatives from all levels of our school, all the departments. We have teachers, administrative assistants, school and district administrators. The communications department is represented in there. We also have a number of departments that are in there: building and grounds, transportation, communication, student services, community liaison, as well as the La Crosse Police Department, Fire Department, and La Crosse Emergency Management. We do this in kind of 6 different areas: comprehensive school safety planning, school campus safety in our safety systems. We do threat assessments, crisis response plans, and we also have preparedness training. We have comprehensive school safety. We start as the whole child. We try to build positive relationships, mental health supports. We have a Handle with Care program through the La Crosse Police Department. We have school bullying policies for, or excuse me, school discipline policies for bullying and harassment. We also ask all of our schools to do an individual school safety plan specific to their schools. On each school campus, they're required to do an invulnerability assessment with the administrators and SROs. We have, again, site safety plans. We have controlled entrances, school doorbells, and badge access systems at all doors. We have enhanced security glass at all the entrances and vape detectors. We're able to communicate with staff and students and parents with phones, texts, and emails, as well as Parent Square. Our community partners have blueprints of all the buildings that they can pull up in their vehicles on the way to an incident. They have facility access 24/7, and they also have access to our cameras to help investigate incidences. Along with the camera system, we have a visitor management system, which is when you come into a school as a visitor, if you're not a staff member, you have to present a state-issued ID on a scanner, and it does a quick background check, and will give you a sticker, it looks like a badge, with your name and a picture of you on it. So all the staff in the school know that, yes, you belong in that school, as well as the students know that there isn't a stranger in the school. We have Content Keeper, which flags different phrases and words that are suspicious. We also, again, have the Speak Up, Speak Out, which is an anonymous reporting system where staff, students, and parents can give us anonymous tips if they know something's happening. We've adopted the I Love You Guys protocol, standard response protocol. Every person in the district, as well as our community police department and fire department, know these 5 response or protocols. When we do get a threat, whether it's 911 or a non-emergency call or Speak Up, Speak Out, and an anonymous tip, these are the 8 steps that we go through to evaluate the level of the crisis response. And this is an example of crisis response. A minimal response example would be a 2nd grader on a playground tripped and fell and injured, had a little cut on his knee. Well, our health assistant or nurse and the playground attendant can easily take care of that. All the way up to a regional response, which would be, again, the train derailment, where we would have La Crosse Emergency Management helping us, the police and fire department. We're still in charge of the kids, but we're taking our direction from La Crosse Emergency Management, the police department, and the fire department. We do this all with preparedness training. Preparedness training is from the National Association of School Psychologists, and these are the 5 mission areas that we build our safety programs both at the district level and at the school level off of. We prevent and prepare for crises. We reaffirm physical health when a crisis does happen, and we evaluate psychological trauma and risk. We provide crisis interventions and respond to the mental health needs. When it's all over and we're back to our new normal, the incident command team, as well as the district safety committee, will get together and we'll evaluate or debrief on what happened, what went well, what didn't go so well, and how can we make it better. Prepare Workshop 1 deals with the physical safety and security of our staff, students, and property, where Workshop 2 deals with the social, emotional, and psychological crisis of our students. These are the 7 different crisis levels of response. Ami will take care of.
So PREPARE being our framework for how we address crises, we have multiple people in the district that are trained in PREPARE 1, so the immediate crisis response. We have multiple administrators that are actually trained as trainers, and we use that framework for all of our school safety planning to address the crisis during the incident. PREPARE 2 is how we support mental health needs in a crisis and following a crisis. That's the part that I work with our student services teams on. We have over 40 members. Actually, every member of our student services teams, our counselors, social workers, psychologists, and nurses are all trained in PREPARE 2. And we also have 6 trainers within the district in PREPARE 2. And really, the idea around PREPARE 2 is to acknowledge that with every crisis, there is a mental health and social emotional need within our student, staff, and family and community. We focus mostly on student response because that's our charge as public educators, but we really accept the fact that in a crisis, we need to be thinking about what the mental health needs of our students are in the crisis and following the crisis. And so PREPARE 2 teaches us how to do that with the mindset that not all crises are equal. And so we are all trained in how to look at the situational conditions of the crisis, whether it be, was this something predictable or unpredictable, because we will react differently based on that. Was it something human caused, or was it a natural disaster that caused this crisis? And then was there intentionality behind the event, or was it an accident? All of those things go into like the emotional response that we could expect from our student body. And so we consider that as we put together responses. And one key thing within PREPARE 2 is to ensure that we are not over-responding and creating more trauma in the event following the crisis. So it's really important to understand that in most crises, 80% of students will return back to their normal functioning with very minimal intervention. They just need to get back to their caregivers, they need to get back to their social group, and get back into their normal routine, and they will, with a little information and support, return back to their state of coping prior to the crisis. And then our student services staff are trained to, what do we do in the event for those 20% that may not? And sometimes that is sharing information with caregivers about how to have conversations about feelings of safety or threats to safety back at home. It's giving information to students so that they have some coping tools when they're feeling stress and anxiety. It's creating safe spaces and following situations so that they can go there and meet with a trained mental health provider, whether it be a school counselor or a mental health provider that we bring into our schools. And then sometimes for those most significant responses, we do have lots of great referral pathways to refer them to people that are better suited to do a long-term support plan in the event of crisis. But the big highlight for me is that we have lots of people that are thinking continuously about any time there's a crisis, from as little as the kid that fell off the playground and broke their arm, and some other kindergarten kids saw it and they're scared for their friend, all the way to some of those more significant events where the safety of the whole community is compromised, and we're having to deal with that. So I'll turn it back to Anne.
The big question on everyone's mind is, are schools safe for children? The simple answer, backed by data, is yes. Research shows that schools are, in fact, among the safest place for children to be. Studies by the U.S. Department of Justice reveal long-term decline in school-related violent crime. School remains one of the safest spaces for young people. How do we do that? The CDC reports that trained staff, security measures, and structured environment contribute significantly to student safety. In schools, children benefit from schedules, consistent adult presence, and peer support, which reduces the risk associated with violence. This structured environment includes regular drills, surveillance, and controlled entries, all of which have been shown to enhance and create a safer setting than most children encounter outside of the school. In summary, schools are not only safe places for learning, they're designed to be safe environments for students. While incidents do occur, they're rare, compared to the safety risks that children face outside of the school. Are there any questions?
Questions from the board? Mr. Beckman?
So if there was a crisis at one building, are there people, staff in other buildings that come and support?
It depends on the level of crisis. If there was a crisis
If
like
needed.
the broken arm, but again, the response expands and contracts based on what the crisis is. Yes, the incident at Central, there was people coming from the administration building that were in the incident commands team. We went over and everyone has an assigned job, so to speak, and we all began doing our jobs. Nick Marcoux is communication. He and Kurt sat down and started getting the information that we wanted to put out. The police department and the SRO were working with the student. I was working on the cameras. Katie and Amber were dealing with the student and working with the camera, trying to track the student through the school. So yes, it depends on the level of crisis. Sorry, that was a really long answer. But depending on the level of the crisis, yes, there are people that come running.
Like in that incident at Central, is there a checklist? I, as the person in charge, say, yes, we did 2, 3, 4, 5, so that we don't forget anything in a trauma situation. Sometimes it's easy to overlook.
Sure, that's a really good question, and that's why we have so many different people and different levels within the school, or excuse me, on the incident response team. As soon as we got the call, I went, and Kurt was right behind me, just to find out exactly what's going on, to see how big of issue it is, report that information back to Hogan, and if it was a larger issue that involved more students or more staff, we would have gotten more people over there.
And somebody notifies the parents or even the students in the building?
Yes, I believe that incident, the police department contacted the parents, or
All parents, I mean all parents of students at the school, because they were concerned.
There's protocols for, when we want to make sure that we know what's going on before we communicate. We want to make sure that stuff is wrapped up and we can be definitive when we communicate. Sometimes we'll let people know, hey, there's something going on, everything's fine, and then more details will come.
yes,
Sometimes we say, hey, everything is fine, here's what happened, and as much as we can tell you. And in some cases, we have to leave things a little bit vague because there might be expulsion hearings in the future, or there's ongoing safety concerns, or there's FERPA requirements to protect students' safety and personal information. But we always communicate as much as we can when we can
yes.
in a way that's safe and secure.
Dr. Sprague?
I'm curious what the decision tree is, or like within the prepare framework for categorizing kinds of threats. Are there aids that are in place for the people who are doing those first steps of evaluating and making the decision, okay, what kind of crisis is this?
As far as what level it is? Or
Yeah, is that more subjective and just based on, the individuals closest to what's happening, or are there supports that they have for like addressing certain kinds of occurrences within a framework? Because I think, everybody would rather overreact 100 times rather than be really wrong once.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. So one thing that, and like the critical thing we look at is like, what is the potential impact? So things that you can keep controlled into like a small group of students or staff, that's really falls in that minimal response. We just have a building team that responds. It's when it gets into where it maybe is impacting the larger building. The building needs to go into a hold and secure. And then you have kids with questions about what's going on, parents that find out and want to know more information about why that happened. And then to the next level, some situations come to the place where they expand beyond a school building. And it may not be that just the situation impacts multiple buildings directly, but we know with social media and the way communication spread, that we really have to think about what's the potential impact, both in the immediate crisis situation, but then also the fallout from the mental health side of it too. And so that's when we would get more people involved. We activate more people from the district level to respond. And then those things that require police, fire, emergency responders, where we maybe aren't the ones directing the situation in the moment. Those would be those more regional responses.
Thank you.
Mr. Minka?
So I'm a little bit confused of how it starts. So I understand the FEMA jargon. I'm trained on some of this stuff right here, and I thought we'd be reviewing this just simply because of school security and more so along the lines too. But my first question is, despite the research showing that it is that schools are safe outside than it is inside too, why is it that La Crosse has so many instances like this before in which we have so many recorded school threats, either bomb threats or shooting threats? The large span of it was in 2022, of course, but why is it that we hear a lot from La Crosse? Is there more of a larger trend in La Crosse area than other areas? Is this something in which we're taking proactive measures with at all?
I would say part of it relates to just being in a media market, so when you're one of the biggest stories in town, it naturally gets reported in news. The other thing, it's like where we live, right? So you're going to hear about the stuff here. We don't hear about the stuff that goes on in Medford or Waukesha or Madison. My experience, the safety level here in La Crosse has been very similar to everywhere else I've been, whether it was in Adams Friendship or Rosholt or Auburndale or Gale Electric Trempealeau. And the types of threats and concerns we've had here in La Crosse have been very similar to the other places that I've been. We had a gun on school property in GET and in Auburndale that led to expulsions. I think there was a shooting just after I left in Auburndale, and we haven't had one of those here in my time. The types of drug issues or fights have been happening from the time I was a high schooler all the way through today. I don't see the behavior and safety risks here in La Crosse as being materially different than anywhere else I've been, and I know Ms. Zabrowski, you've been in other places as well. I don't know if it feels similar or.
No, I would agree with that. I'd also say that I think we live in the way that communication spreads. We hear about things more. And I will say, I think there is we have to be more thoughtful about the impact of how some of these events that maybe 10, 15 years ago, we had sent it out and it would have just been reported on and stopped. But now it goes through between students and fear and anxiety build. And so that's why we really spend a lot of time, or as much time, on how do we support that feeling of safety and security after things happen, knowing that we have all these things in place to keep our schools safe and secure. But we also need to take care of the perception of safety that our students and our families and our communities have as well.
Ms. Sukla? Unless you have another question, Mr. Minka?
One's for me, I just don't have it in my head just yet.
All right, I'll go to Ms. Sukla then.
So, thank you for presenting on this. As you said, no crisis is the same, and this is such a broad topic, from mental health crisis to an injury to violence of individual or large group. It's almost impossible to have this presentation, so I appreciate your efforts on this. I'm a little confused as to what the point of this, how this got on the agenda, the point of it. If the point of it is because of Central, I don't know that's appropriate for us to be discussing the details of that.
This was scheduled before that.
Yeah, so it's
This-
scheduled
this is
well
long
in
time,
advance as
way-
an opportunity to celebrate our school safety things. If folks have central specific questions, there will be a time later today
Sure.
to get into the weeds.
So is there a
was-
schedule for when these showcases are that
This was on 6E, our OE, operational expectations.
this
6E,
topic was?
correct?
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So there's time later today to get.
That's
into
the
these.
That's
closed
why I
session.
this isn't appropriate for us.
That's our
to-
closed
This
session
is,
then?
this is,
Okay, that actually changes a lot. Okay, that makes sense.
Will we get a copy of this?
Yeah, the PowerPoint would be helpful to
Yep,
get.
absolutely.
Mr. Bagneski.
On occasion, you might need some additional help. So do you have community resources that can be called on to come into the building and so on to assist staff?
Go ahead. Oh, absolutely, yes. Kurt is in charge of the community liaison, and he has access and numbers for multiple, both therapists as well as the police department. We have very, very good community partners that will be there in the drop of a hat.
So we mentioned more about, at the beginning of the slide, other things we've been adding to our schools to increase our safety. quick question I had is about the vape detectors, that we have them in half of our bathrooms, I believe, too, in which I've been hearing a lot of good news about that, too. I've also heard some things. I heard from a teacher at Logan High School that is next to one of the bathrooms that don't have vape detectors, so there's a large inflow coming over to there about drug usage at all. Is there any plans of increasing the vape detectors? Are we thinking remaining them the same? Mr. Engel, I think we talked about this a little bit as well. I'm just kind of curious more about the plan of the addition of vape detectors and more so with the anti-drug measures coming into our schools. How are we being
Start
responsible?
first, Ms. Andrus, how have they been working?
They've been working fantastically, very well, very well. If you're going to talk for a minute, I may be able to show
Yep,
you
so
some-
our vape detectors have been working well in identifying when things happen. They are not cheap. It's a pretty big financial investment in order to put those in place. And initially, we wanted to make sure that they worked and to ensure that we had safe places for students to use the restroom in our schools. The next challenge would be to identify if we want them everywhere. That's a lot of things to respond to, and it may create safe places in our bathrooms, but for as long as children have been in schools, they've been trying to get away with stuff. And if it doesn't happen in our bathrooms, I suspect it will happen somewhere else. And so then the question is, how do we address that? And the problem's probably not going away in terms of the use of vapes in schools. And so it's a question of how do we reasonably address it and monitor it in a way that is manageable by our staff. It would be nice if all the students showed up and just did the right thing every day, but I suspect if you look back to your high school days, there might have been a kid or two that tried to get away with something.
They might go back to the baseball dugout or their cars like they did when I went to Central, in which case more students would feel safe going to the bathroom because most kids aren't hanging out in the baseball dugout. And one thing that I heard at Central is that the vape detectors are placed in bathrooms that weren't the problem bathrooms in the first place, like the female bathroom where most of the vaping occurs does not have a vape detector in it.
The vape detectors were placed originally based on what the school administration thought would be the best places to put them, based on no other knowledge than what their advice was. Previous to that, we had, at least I wasn't aware of the amount of vaping that was going on in the school. But if you look at the screen, this is a vape detector. This is Central third floor, Central second floor men's.
Is this going to capture any students?
No, I'm not going to play it. I'm not going to play it. But this is when the graph down here is the indicator of what is happening. So this is the alert we get, or I get on my cell phone, as well as the school administrators. Yeah.
Are the students aware that they're in there?
Yes.
So is it, you can see it and stuff?
Yes.
This may be a silly question, but most of mine are. But do they make fake ones of those? Because just like we put up fake cameras places and stuff, is it something to consider? You can always switch those around and have live ones in some areas and fake ones in others. And I shouldn't say that out loud on this? Is that what you're saying?
Giving them ideas, Scott.
Well, now that you have said it, that would be something that we could talk at the district safety committee meeting and see what their thoughts are.
I talked to an administrator who had a student in 3 days in a row who set off the vape detector. And each day they're like, just testing to make sure it worked. That kind of precociousness is typical of students. And that is an option that we could consider to reduce our costs. I don't know what the difference in cost ultimately would be. You still need cameras outside and some other things, but.
Kind of changing direction a little bit. I know you talked a lot about the flow of information through students and through kind of word of mouth. I'm wondering, as an effort to mitigate that, if you do or would ever offer kind of like public reports for school safety, maybe not going into the details of specific incidents, but just overall kind of controlled information to try and reassure parents outside of their students' opinions, what's going on?
Yeah, we've actually had some of those conversations around what that could look like. I think at a school level, for sure, we have staff that could work alongside administrators to talk about that. One thing that we're getting better at, I mean, we just have formally been trained in some of this mental health response within the last year. One thing that we've talked about is like, how do we meet with students to talk about maybe a little bit about like reassure their safety, but also like, here are the strategies of what you can do when you're feeling unsafe. Here are who you can talk to when you're worried about things. Here's our I'm blanking out, yeah. Our anonymous reporting sites. So those are certainly things with working with building administrators that student services staff can help with, district staff can help with having those conversations. It's a great idea.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Dr. Sprague? Nothing? Mr. Manka?
A lot of my questions, I think, are just related mostly to the recent incident, which I think
We can do that at another time.
yeah, we
Thank
as a
you.
board, I'd strongly urge maybe having hearing for SRO specifically about school safety or school security, that kind of things right here. I guess I just have one last question here is, we have nurses of all of our schools, some of them travel around. Do we have a nurse at every single school to be able to respond immediately to situations? Do they have the supplies? I know in high schools they have AEDs that they even teach students some of the stuff as well. How are we able to have such a quick response time? How are we doing with that in our schools?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, we have 5 nurses in our district that cover all of our schools. We also have a health assistant in each building that is trained and has specific healthcare needs delegated to them by the school nurse in their absence, and a medical response team at every building. So that is trained in, if something happens, that team responds, calls 911, gets the nurse on the line, and the nurse gets to the school. Our nurse team is great in that they communicate really well with each other, that sometimes even if the assigned nurse isn't the closest person to the situation will get there right away to respond. And then we have AEDs in every building. We have so many people trained in CPR and first aid, so many, and which is great. And then those medical response teams that are ready and prepared to respond to those. We also have really strong protocol on when we call 911. I mean, generally, anytime there's an emergency, nurse is coming, but they've already called 911, and generally first responders are there as the nurse is arriving.
Okay. How many instances per year do we think we have such events where we do have to call 911?
Oh, I don't have that data in front of me, but I definitely could get it for you.
I get notified every time there's a 911 call, and I bet it's once a week, maybe once every other week, depending on
Really,
the
once a
season.
week?
Is that because we have some very medically
Right, it
fragile
is.
students?
We just have
Sometimes.
a lot of people. I mean, there's 7,000
Yeah.
people, and I mean, it could be a potential broken arm after us. Like, if you have swings, you have broken limbs, right? So, like, we have swings, so we have broken limbs. That happens.
Somebody has.
Seizures.
After school, there might be an extracurricular event. There might be an older person who might be having a cardiac incident. You know, I get notified for some of those. Allergies are very common. Those happen on a regular basis. You know, there's just so many. There might be a thing that's going on at home that shows up at school as like an inflammation, and now we're dealing with that. Most of it's not related to like a critical incident, and typically the parent's able to be there and take them themselves to the hospital if it needs to be addressed. But
I can share the actual data with you. I can pull that tomorrow morning and get it to you if you want.
If it happens so frequently, we would know that we have if it isn't become an issue or we don't have any major problems with it all, it's a battle-tested theory. It sounds mostly good, but I'd just like to see some of the data about that after this board meeting. That's available.
Absolutely. I can get that for you tomorrow.
I'm just curious if we have any incentives for staff to be CPR trained, to do, first response kind of training, to be part of the prepared teams.
So we pay staff for their time to get CPR trained, and then they get their official certification. There are certain positions in the district that we require training for. Anytime we have a field trip, we have to have somebody trained in CPR and first aid that goes on that field trip. So, and then all of our athletic and extracurricular team coaches are trained, and our special education staff are trained. So we have a number, and then the medical response team are all trained. So we have a number of people. We pay for their time, and they also get to hold that certification for outside as well. And then I would say from a prepare perspective, the effort is underway to train and prepare all of our administrators, and then they will bring in leadership teams from each building to train all of them. We did that about 6 years ago maybe, and we're doing that again. Prepare to, honestly, our student services staff want to be trained in it. They don't need incentive. They find it very valuable and increases their professional skill set. So no need to incentivize. They want the skills and want to do that work.
We've had 5 911 calls this year in 12 weeks.
Dr. Garcia?
This is more about like tools available than the framework or the process, which sound like they've been well practiced. But I had a community member ask if we ever use drug dogs or why we don't use them anymore to come through schools. Is that part of the safety plan that we use, like the vape detectors?
I'm not aware of what that is.
Kurt might have an answer on drug dogs.
Before the pandemic, apparently we did. Yeah, maybe I wasn't leaning in. I'm too short to lean close enough. Sorry.
Yeah, our policy allows for it in our search and seizure policy. It needs to be authorized by the superintendent. I think the last time that we did it was what you had talked about, kind of pre-COVID. There's even limitations with that. There's the search and seizure policy gets into the details of what we can be searching. Those dogs can't be searching humans, and we
Right.
can't, line kids up and things like that.
Oh, yeah, no,
So-
I taught in high schools, and
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
kind of like, we treated them kind of like therapy dogs, even though that's not what they were.
Oh,
But-
gotcha, yeah.
But, so,
Yeah.
I guess I was just wondering, seeking an answer to take back to that community member, which is that it sounds like it's something that's authorized on a case-by-case basis for specific reasons, and not something that we would do randomly, which sounds
Yeah,
like.
and it
a
could
good-
be done randomly. I mean, our policy allows for that, related to being able to sweep the building. Some of it's related to, because we'll run into safety issues where we need to get special canines that can detect bombs and things like that. And some of it's
Right.
availability and the perception of the need for that. There's just a lot of operational back-end sorts of things for that, for
All right.
using animals that way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Sukla?
I have an obscure question for Ann. So, according to our budget documents, we have 5,711 students, and you've got 1,005 FTEs of staff, so that comes up to 6,716, and you talk about 7,000 bodies. Do we have like community members or volunteers, or is the FTEs like a bunch more people?
We do have community members and volunteers. Those were not counted, and I pulled those two numbers out of an AI app. So
I was just
they
curious,
may not,
just if we were
they may
looking at
not be
safety for
accurate,
the
and so I
community.
apologize if the number is not
No, my
spot
concern
on.
was, my question was more like, are we talking about protecting volunteers and stuff too? Is that?
Oh,
part of-
absolutely,
yeah. Okay,
absolutely,
thank you.
and like sporting events, and yes.
Bus drivers, those are involved.
Bus
with the
drivers,
bus
yes.
company.
And
Absolutely.
FTEs will count part-times together and to make one.
Right,
So,
right.
so there's.
Exactly.
Just the FTE doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah,
the
I
exact
apologize
number.
for
Nope.
if the
No,
number
that's,
wasn't, I
was
should
just-
have
I
checked that.
wasn't pointing
so-
out that, I was just
Okay.
like, there's a difference and you know your numbers, so that I'm just
Okay.
trying to figure out the pieces.
Okay.
How often are they recertified in first aid, et cetera?
American Heart Association.
CPR
It's
is
2
every
years?
2 years.
Is it, yeah, it used to be 2, so I didn't.
2 years, yep. And I will make one note. AMI staff is trained in Workshop 2. We have 7 trainers in Workshop 1, and then all of our secondary schools, high school and middle school staff have been trained and are certified in Workshop 1. And the the elementary schools did what is called a Prepare One boot camp, which is about a 5-hour training. And every summer, that will go back and forth. So the elementary school administration will get the full Prepare One training, which deals with the physical safety of the school staff and property. So those two will go back and forth every summer. It's just like a refresher type training. Any other questions?
The only ones that I have, first, thank you for the focus on the mental health piece of dealing with circumstances as they occur, because you're absolutely right. Something as minor as an injury to as major as, for example, the hurricane effects in Nashville, North Carolina.
Yes.
Right? I mean, every single level has some sort of mental component to it, mental health component. So thank you for that focus. Could you just quickly talk about, in that after-action review, after an incident happens,
Sure.
any incident, how do those situations impact policy for the long term? So after an incident happens, is there a thought about this? We need to review our policies and make adjustments, and how often does that happen? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. For example, the incident at Central, we had, and we can get into the details about this later, but there was one piece of the response to that needs some tweaking, and we immediately came up with the plan of revising it, making it better, and we're in the process of implementing those plans right now and continue forward. Absolutely.
Okay. My other question is just, knowing that you have an incident command group here, how often do you get an opportunity to train with maybe the city incident command or county incident command, so that we know we're not tripping over each other when a situation happens that could get to that level?
Sure. Thank you. That's a very good question. Last summer, we actually did a full crisis incident command. It was we had Gunderson Hospital, we had the Sheriff Department, Police, Fire, EMS, we had La Crosse County Emergency Management, and we actually had an active shooter training where the police came in and fired blanks in the air. We used Britta's students, help me. Thank you. The Health Science Academy students came in, and Gunderson came, and they did the full makeup with the fake blood and everything. So we did that once last year. I would like to do it every year and add reunification onto that, so we get the full measure of responding to an incident.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's important, just given the fact that you don't use it, you lose it.
Exactly.
Right? But also, it almost needs to become muscle memory at some point, so that when things happen, people are not thinking, they're acting immediately and trying to handle the situation as quickly as possible. So kudos to you all for the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Final questions?
Yes. My last question is just, when's the most recent time you've done drills on school evacuations at all? There were...
School evacuations are done, for a fire drill, they're done once a month.
Right, I know about the fire drills. That's something which even students there have ingrained on. I remember back in 2022, I think this was the only time there was an evacuation where students had to evacuate Central to go off to another school. They had to, it was January 3rd that year because of a threat that came over to that school. Is there just, how often do we, I'm asking the wrong question here, I have a feeling of, but how often do we practice for those kind of scenarios at the staff level?
At the staff level, every school has a safety team, and they do tabletop workshops. We're also in the process, or tabletop exercises. We're also in the process of establishing a district reunification location. And again, we can get into that at a later time, but the evacuation portion and accounting for all students is done every time a fire drill is done. As far as the reunification, which I think you're referring to when you're moving the students to a different location, that is done once or excuse me, once in the fall semester and once in the spring semester.
All right, so it's twice per year.
Yes.
Yeah, we do a fire drill every month, we do
Yes.
tornado drills twice a year, and we're required to do a safety drill once a year as well. And we usually tailor that based on the developmental age of the kids involved. So we don't make kindergartners go running out of a building, that's traumatic and not useful. Whereas with the high school students, we might have them move from Spence to a church nearby in order to, or not Spence, Longfellow, move from the building to a nearby place for an evacuation drill. Each year it kind of depends on what our focus is, and we try and alternate that and change it over time. It might be reacting to an active shooter or a bomb drill, but our goal is to do drills without inciting fear and traumatizing people and making it developmentally appropriate. What we have found over years of doing these drills is that you don't need to have kids running through fields with fake gunshots going off to get the benefit of an evacuation drill. Our students are compliant. They will do what their teachers tell them, even in times of stress. We know that from experience. And so we can do calm drills that go through the motions without inciting an emotional response.
Any other questions?
Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for the presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ann.
All right. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the superintendent's consent agenda. And so the consent agenda is a mechanism that is used by the board to deal with routine business that must come before the body. Are there any items that the board members want to remove from the superintendent's consent agenda? Hearing none, then is there a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion to approve the items on the superintendent's consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved by Dr. Sprague, seconded by Mr. Manka to approve the items on the superintendent's consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Motion is carried. We'll move on to the board consent agenda. Are there any items that the board members want to remove from the consent agenda?
I don't know if any to remove, but I would like to take the time to talk about, while it's up here, while we can, talk about what the linkage is.
So then you,
So we do.
yeah, so we
order
do,
that.
you're asking to remove
Otherwise,
those?
we move on.
Yes.
Then yes, the linkages.
Second.
So which, is there a specific one or just all linkages?
All four?
All four.
Okay. So then with that, let us go ahead and approve the BOE minutes first, and then we'll get into the conversation regarding the linkages. So is there a motion and a second to approve the Board of Education minutes?
I make a motion to approve the November 4th, 2024 Board of Education minutes.
Okay, moved by Ms. Sukla, seconded by Mr. Bagniski to approve the November 4th, 24 Board of Education minutes. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Motion is carried, and so now we can have a conversation about the linkages. Mr. Manka?
The linkages. I've noticed from a lot of the discussions with the teachers, there are a couple, most of them are very positive here, but I was noticing a big trend about them where they were talking a lot about mental health when it comes to, even among the elementary school levels, like the kids enter into, let me take a look at my notes here real quick here. Yeah, and the staff as well, that's, shoot, where is that? Sorry, I went to the wrong link here. That I think it was good for a board to address is what exactly could we do to just at least acknowledge these issues and just make sure we have a solid plan going ahead, is with the mental health of students and staff. How exactly can we go forward with the mental health crisis in our community?
I think that's a great question. I think we're seeing now students coming in after the pandemic, but I hate to keep going back to that and using it as an excuse, but it was a traumatic incident for a lot of folks. They had a disconnection from school, and what we saw is a significant change in how students showed up to school, with a year of absence in a lot of cases from routines and structures, and then our youngest students being exposed to, face masks, and then the rise of devices and social media playing an impact on our adolescents. There's been a wide range of impacts that have affected our students and mental health. We have comprehensive social emotional learning programs to help students identify their own feelings, identify relationships, to self-regulate, to regulate their relationships. And these are things that our teachers have been doing for all of time, but we have names for them today and kind of standard curriculum and standards. And our students are getting regular ongoing instruction as it relates to these things. I will say, though, that if you come in with if you're a little bit behind as a 1-year-old and you stay behind as a 2 and 3-year-old and you get to 4-year-old kindergarten, you're maybe not where a typically developed student might be with a normal world around them. It can be really challenging in a classroom. And I've been in a number of kindergarten classrooms this year specifically and seen some of those kind of extreme student behaviors that arise from some real mental health challenges. I know our families have been struggling, which leads to students struggling. And we provide as many supports as possible kind of for the acute thing right now. We have extra special education TAs, special education teachers. We have intervention programs. We sometimes go through referral processes for special education if it might arise to the level of a disability, and then additional special education supports there as well. It's really a community effort, though, and our parents need support, and our parents need to provide what they can, but it is a real challenge, both for our youngest learners and I think for our middle and high schoolers as it relates to social media and the impacts that has had on self-esteem and mental health as well. So it's really comprehensive at this point.
Right. The reason why I was asking this too is because when I was over at the Emerson linkage, it wasn't on this agenda either, but I feel like it might have been, is that there were a lot of teachers discussed that they felt like there's a disconnect with the board of what the resources they were requesting. And I'm sorry, I'm struggling how to word this too. Maybe just my inexperience with this too.
Can we discuss the Emerson one when it comes up on the agenda next meeting?
Yes. I just have a question of why is it not on this agenda? Is there a procedural reason why it has to be for the next one?
Generally, we give about a week to 2 weeks just in case there are any additional comments that come out from the linkage. If maybe somebody wasn't present in person, they do still have the opportunity to email comments to the board members to get on the official notes. So it's a quick turnaround from the timing of the linkage to the posting of the agenda.
And I would say in terms of resources, we were incredibly fortunate to have a Project Aware grant, which provided $1 million+ to our school district to provide additional resources. But that was a competitive grant that went away after 5 years. And so we tried to build as many kind of long-lasting procedures and processes in place, but all that support went away once that grant was done. There are some few additional dollars from the state for mental health, but it does not amount to much. It's maybe $50,000, $100,000 a year that we have to be able to provide some sort of services. We're very thankful that our community supported the last operational referendum, and we were able to sustain the behavioral interventionists and coaches that are in our schools to help out with things. But addressing students' mental health in the kind of intensive way our community seems to expect today has been an unfunded mandate. That this expectation did not exist 10 years ago. You know, it's been a new expectation of schools by our community because of the crisis that has arisen without really enough funding from our state to be able to properly provide all the resources that our teachers are asking for. We have done our best with the limited resources we have to shuffle, change positions, provide opportunities. But it's a lot at some of our schools, and it's really difficult to provide what our teachers are asking for when the state hasn't provided the resources to match that expectation that our community has today.
Yeah, I appreciate Mr. Manka putting this out so we can talk about the linkages. In August, I think it was, we learned that we had a linkage a year ago, and there was a concern discussed, and then we didn't get to discuss it until August, so I appreciate this opportunity. I did want to point out a couple things of note just for the public to be aware of, and then I had a couple questions. Some common themes came out in these 4 linkages. One of them that I thought was really interesting, I think it showed up in 3 of them, is the preparation of the kindergartners coming to us. that was interesting, that has not shown up in linkages, I don't think, before. And so these are the COVID babies, and something is different. It's clearly showing up when the LEA, Hogan staff, and Spence staff all notice it and mention that in their comments to us. I am delighted that we got the referendum passed, because a couple of the linkages reference the uncertainty of what's going to happen with buildings and the challenge that has put on staff. So I'm glad that that has been addressed, and thank the community sincerely for that. The need to attract and retain quality staff continues to be really important, and that showed up in several of the comments. And I think that that's something this board has set as a priority. A couple of them commented, when I said anything you else want to share with the board, commented that they want to make sure the board keeps in mind that all of their decisions should be what's in the best interest of students. And I don't know if that means because we're on the same team or we haven't been, but I just thought that was of interest. So a couple of questions I have. One, the other comment was particularly the linkage that I was at, again, just doesn't show up in the minutes unless you're at the session itself. Staff don't feel safe with even many of our elementary kids because of the mental health and other behavioral issues that are going on. And I think we as a board, I don't know how we address our policies or what we need to do, but I'm very concerned about how do we attract and retain quality staff when staff don't feel safe. And the staff that spoke about it love their students, they love their work, they love their profession, there's great pride, but some of them are kind of scared, and I think that we need to acknowledge that and talk about how do we help support our staff in that way. There was a comment about standards-based grading. They appreciate the help from administration, but they are still struggling with the implementation. Seemed a little backwards, so I think there's still bumps in the road from that. I think people see progress, but they're still acknowledging there's still bumps in the road. The biggest question I had is, one comment talked about better ways to engage families for conferences, which is always how to engage families in general. Are conferences available to families by video, or are they only in person? And I'm wondering, would that make any difference to engage families in a way? Just a weird thought I had as I read that.
Yeah, our philosophy is however a parent wants to engage with their teacher, we will try and make that happen. So if you can't make it the nights that we have it, we can do it some other time. If Zoom is a preferred method, I would expect our principals and teachers to be accommodating to whatever that is. I think during the pandemic, right, the standard was virtual. That worked for a lot of people really, really well. It was very easy to connect that way within the context of your busy life. I think we've moved away from that as a standard because we feel such a benefit from being in person and doing things together and seeing like the environment and inviting people into the school. But if a family had a challenge or a concern, I would expect that we would be making accommodations for virtual.
I agree, in person's always better, but once you get home and you get your shoes off, like getting them back on and heading out the door and figuring out supper for your kids, like that's a hurdle. And so if a parent schedule a conference and your conference is going to be at 5:45, if they could do it on their phone, would that be an option? And could we engage more families? Just a thought I had.
That's a great thought.
The other reason I just want to bring up all these points is because a lot of people go through a lot of work coming to meet with us, and I just want to make sure that they know that their comments are being heard by this board and really being taken seriously. So look forward to more linkages.
Yeah, I sat through some of those linkages, and then the staff kind of said, well, you can hear it from us, and then you can say, well, yeah, how do I take this or not? And they invited people, board members, to come in and sit in their classrooms and so on. So I did. And let me tell you, some of those teachers, they were absolutely super in terms of the number of things that they had in their pockets to make sure students stayed on task. And yet it was a very, very trying situation for staff. And so, number one, I'd like you to know that it's real, the misbehaviors or non-compliance, and then also the staff, they were doing a fantastic job.
I would second that, just sharing my own experience. When I first came back to the district and I started substitute teaching, I would call particular attention to the way Northwoods International their whole system of support, stepping in as a brand new substitute teacher and just, not having that particular background and training in special education or that kind of emotional behavioral management, and having whoever's closest, ready to help with whatever the question was, with whatever the issue was. And so that community effort that each individual building is taking, I think is really important. And it's, Dr. Engel, to your point before about the whole conversation around mental health, is that part of the issue is that we are in the position of reacting to forces entirely outside of our control, right? COVID being a good example of that, and the changes that, we have to reckon with. And then, thinking about what are our internal structures. And so it's like, is this something that is ever going to be solved by policy? Well, I doubt that. But by thinking about how are we empowering and resourcing the individuals in our buildings to successfully respond to those challenges that will always be changing, will always be unfolding. I think that's the key.
And just one suggestion might be, is it possible to coordinate with some of the people in the community that run behavior-based programs, that they could come and sit with staff and say, hey, this is what's happening, and they work with people, family or parenting plays. Can we start working with community assets to help us through this problem?
I was actually going to point out that one really cool partnership the school district has with Gunderson is the availability of telehealth appointments for behavioral health in the schools. So, for example, tomorrow my kiddo has a 9 a.m. appointment with a therapist from Central. So I don't have to leave work and miss work to bring her to an appointment. The amount of school they're missing is reduced. It's awesome.
I think that's one of the legacies of Project Aware. We were able to put in telehealth rooms in every one of our buildings, so students have a safe private place to go to if they want behavioral health services in our schools. We also have great partnerships with community behavioral health providers, so that we have a long list of people that are willing to help our students, and they form a little council that helps advise us on how to proceed. And then we still have a program in partnership with Gunderson that provides free counseling services for students on a kind of an acute basis, and then sees what they need as they move forward. That has been on and off because of funding models, but we continue. I would say, as I look across our peers across the state, to probably lead the way in terms of our mental health services and how we approach things. We're maybe not explorers, but we're definitely pioneers, and we're right there at the forefront of how to best deliver mental health services to students in our schools.
Thank you. I think it's also important talking to many of the people that it was brought up, and Dr. Sprague brought it up, that we need to try different things. I mean, we can't stay stagnant on what we always do and think that's all right, but we also have to be careful on what they had brought up, the big flavor of the month deal. We'll start something, we'll start a process procedure, and it'll go on for a while, and then it kind of just fades away, then we'll get another one. And that becomes very frustrating for the staff, as well, as I fully understand, because being in my past life, I used to start those, and sometimes it didn't stick, and I know that does get frustrating. So I think we have to be, at least understand that this does affect them, and every change we make is a drastic change, especially to teachers or staff that may be understaffed in the first place. So I think that's something we have to keep an eye on as well.
I just have one last question too. Is there a time in the future in which the board usually discusses these kind of topics, or a standard and procedure we have in our policies towards preparing ourselves for mental health that the administration is prepared to do in the future?
We've given workshops in the past on mental health. If that's a continued topic of interest, we'll schedule it and put it on the agenda and get it in front of staff. I know Ms. Zabrowski has done a great job on the whole child in the past, as has Mr. Teff, and we'd be happy to do so again. It's a perennial topic and probably an enduring one at this point, and so happy to talk about that further.
Yeah, so everybody has a survey about workshop topics at their seat, so filling that out would be important to be able to turn in so we can figure out what it is we want to discuss.
Is there a plan, once all the linkages are done, that maybe we have a workshop and go through each item in each school and talk about them? Because I think that their suggestions should go, at least be talked about further and not just brought up into this little short I'd like to dig deeper into some of them and to have just, one of our workshops just on the linkages when they're complete. I think it would be beneficial to everyone.
Like an annual?
Sure. So what I would say is, again, that's something to add on to the survey. Secondly, I know the administration is always reviewing all of the linkage comments that come in, so they are taking action as soon as they see those come through. So, I think
Would be nice
that
for the
needs to be
board.
important to recognize. And then third, recognize that a third of the buildings are the ones that have linkages per year. So you're only going to hear about a third of what is going on, not to say that that's not important, but just recognizing the scope of what we will be discussing if we have that type of workshop. Mr. Finbright?
Yeah, I would also remind the board it's really important, if you hear some concerns that are pressing, definitely send that staff to us. We're more than willing to talk to them. I think it's important to have firsthand communication with staff, especially if you're hearing it and we're not. I think that's important. You've got the relationship. Absolutely send it our way so we can kind of know what's going on.
Yeah, I would also remind the board members that you have the absolute authority to pull something off the consent agenda and have a conversation at the board table. So, if you do see things that you want to discuss from the linkages, then you follow the process of pulling it from the consent agenda, and then we have a conversation at the board table. Anything else?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the September 18th LEA linkage, the October 14th Hogan staff linkage, the October 16th district leadership team linkage, and the November 4th Spence staff linkage summaries.
Okay. Moved by Ms. Sukla, seconded by Mr. Manka to approve all 4 linkage summaries as noted by Ms. Sukla's motion. Well, we have one. Yeah.
I spoke softly.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion is carried, and we'll move on to matters reserved for board action. So the first one is the approval of the certification and summary statement of the Board of Canvassers for the November 5th, 2024 referendum election. So, any comments, thoughts from the board members before we move into a vote on it?
I think huge thank you to the community to say thank you for your support, and it was strong support, and I think that's really noteworthy, and I think that says a lot about our community and their thoughts about our schools, and it makes our job a lot different and a lot easier moving forward, and we can focus on other things than old buildings. So I just want to extend a huge thank you, and I think everybody's head's nodding, so I don't think I'm saying anything unusual.
Other comments?
I just want to acknowledge Dr. Engel and his team of administrators who led us through sometimes a confusing process for determining how we're going to address elementary consolidation. And I mean, I'll be the first to admit that when the FAC process started, I thought we had a very frank conversation one-on-one where I thought it was too soon to start these conversations. The process felt a little confusing, and then when the recommendation came out and there were so many divisions and people upset about that, then, I mean, fast forward to now when we have a past referendum, I think everything was set up in a strategic way that led to the success of the referendum and got a lot of information and data and conversation into the community. And that spread of information, I think, is what helped to get it passed. And I appreciate all of the work that was done by district leadership to help prepare us to make decisions that allowed the community to have input on what we're going to do moving forward. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other comments from board members? Okay. Is there a motion and a second?
Second.
So, Moved by Mr. Bagnaski, seconded by Ms. Berkadal to approve the certification and summary statement of the Board of Canvassers for the November 5th, 2024 referendum election as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Motion is carried. We'll move on to the Operational Expectation Monitoring Report, OE5, Financial Planning. And this is where we will be voting on OE5 itself. So is there a motion and a second?
Make a motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Newmeister, seconded by Mr. Bagneski to,
Are we?
I'm assuming in compliance?
Yeah.
Compliance,
Yep.
Okay.
So, in regard to the monitoring report for policy OE5, financial planning, and with respect to the provisions of policy BSR5, superintendent accountability, the Board of Education concludes that the superintendent and district are in compliance. Any discussion on this one? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion has carried. We'll move on to the information portion. And again, we're back to OE5, but to discuss just the proposed changes from the administration. Dr. Engel, anything that you'd like to discuss there?
Ms. Sprang did a nice job of removing interpretations, as we've discussed in the past, and updating definitions to ensure that they reflect the policy language, not the indicators below.
So just doing the regular cleanup that we've been doing with all other OEs. There is no change on the indicators.
That's correct.
All right. So is there any questions, comments, or thoughts from the board members about the proposed changes? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to district visioning, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Engel for this conversation.
One of the things, kind of with the culmination of this referendum, and it's something I've been thinking about for a while now, but is a visioning process for our school district to kind of give us a path forward, who we are, who we want to be, what is it that our community thinks we are and wants to be. And it came up in part during our facility advisory committee as a part of the conversation at some of the tables. It was kind of casting forward, like, who are we as a school district? What do we want to be? What is our, who are we? And we've got some things like dream, believe, achieve as like a little bit of a motto. We've got, logos. We've got our mission statement. But as we think about some of the big things that are coming next, whether it's long-range facility planning, whether it's reevaluating our results policies about our students, and what we want our students to be able to know and do, it would be really nice to have a strong community vision for who we are and what they expect out of the school district. And with that strong community vision, I think the school board and the school district administration can move confidently into the future, knowing that we're aligned with what our community wants. And all of you are elected to represent that view, and you certainly bring that yourselves individually. But to be able to point to a process and something that our community has spoken vocally on, I think would go a long way to justifying decisions, expenses, processes, next steps for our community. I laid out a potential timeline between November and April of next year. The vision of the outcome would be a community-developed, board-endorsed vision for our district and our graduates that provides the guiding light for our student success. It proposes, the school board making the charge, a steering committee kind of leading the way, some basic focus questions there, using focus groups, surveys, interviews, open houses to gather information, and ultimately ending with a vision statement for our school district, as well as kind of pillars to focus on, and a portrait of a graduate, which is a concept that's out there, which kind of outlines what we want students to be able to know, do, and be to be ready for life. And I think that could really inform our results policies, and rethink some of that, as a part of a board effort. And I think those pillars would give the board an opportunity to look at our operational expectations, and is everything in alignment there? So I think it could be really foundational for our school district's policy. That's a proposal that I have that I'm interested in, and if it has board support, I'd be curious about next steps or your thoughts.
Questions, comments from the board?
I think visioning exercises in general are really useful. I've seen them take place at organizations of different sizes and centering on mission and that expectation. That last question in particular, what do our students need to be, know, and do, I think is a key one for our purposes.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'd add to that, to piggyback, is just, I think sometimes the community sees every election of the school board as a new start, a new change with not necessarily a good direction or a good focus. I think this process allows there to be a little bit more continuity over different boards. This is the direction that we are planning to go. This is the work that we have done to ensure that this is the right path moving forward, and we are centered on what we want to believe and achieve moving forward for our school district, for our students, for our community. So I appreciate those comments. Ms. Sukla?
I love strategic planning, live and breathe it. So any opportunity to strategic planning is exciting to me. However, I would much prefer that we as a board have a workshop on strategic planning and figure out what do we as a board think. In previous years, when I was on the board somewhere between 2001, 2018, we had a couple strategic plans. And I think those actually did advance us in some ways, challenged us in many ways. And quite frankly, I think for the board to say, yes, I approve this process, and then at the end prove because the public said this is what it is, I feel we as a board the community expects us to have a lot more involvement in that. The focus questions I think are okay, but quite frankly, they ring a little bit like the questions we ask in linkages, and I think we are asking the public some of that already, and I think we as a board, as the leaders of this organization, as the conduit to our real boss, which is the community, I think we need to get our head together before we start bringing in administrators, support staff, handpicked community members. I just think we as a board, and several of us have asked for it, to have the board have this discussion, and I'd prefer to start with that than to create this other process, which we may end up agreeing to, but I think, again, in this information portion of the agenda, I'm not comfortable with agreeing to this at this point. I think we as a board need the opportunity to gel together.
I think what I would push back on there is just, it's a chicken or egg conversation, right? Because we could have the board start that process and then take it to the community, and we could have the community say, well, you've already chosen the process and now you're asking us to endorse it, and we don't. On the flip side of that, we could start with the community, have them start the process and the conversation, and then it comes here, and then we might have to make adjustments or changes based upon what we know as a board. So I think it's either way we go, we're going to have positives of how the process will run, and we will have challenges about how the process will run. I personally would appreciate us leaning into our community, since they are the ones who elected us, to first have that stab at what we should do and where we should be going, and then we as a board follow, because that we always talk about the community is leading us. The community tells us where we need to go. So just for a devil's advocate comment there, I mean, I think it's either way we go, there will be positives, there will be challenges, and in the end, my hope is that we together, community, board, and every stakeholder of this school district will understand and value the process and will be proud of what we come out with at the end.
Yeah, to respond to that, I think the community expects us to do this work and to do the heavy lifting on this. And for us, I mean, we do so many linkages. We do a lot of community engagement. So the community doesn't think we aren't connecting with them. I think, and these focus questions I think are good, but they really sound a little bit like our linkage questions. And I think, so we've been doing linkages for 25 years. And so I think to say that we haven't been asking the community's questions isn't completely accurate either.
Well, again, that's what the beauty of having different perspectives and having them come to the table and create a process that in the end will be a positive experience for everybody. Other comments?
I would agree that I think we, with the linkages and the groups, neighborhood associations, whatever, have a pretty good feel for where the district should go. I feel like they elected us to do a job. And if they don't like it, then maybe they can recall us or not vote for us the next time around. But I think we need to take a leading role in this whole thing as a board.
Other thoughts? Hearing none, or Dr. Sprague?
I'm sorry, I'm forming a
That's
thought.
okay.
in terms of the timing of, you know, when the board takes a leading role and whatever that looks like, I'm of two minds, I think. I think this particular timeframe of like right now until April is a little unrealistic to implement a plan like this. I think where we as the elected representatives have one of the most important jobs is in the agenda setting. So like I always love writing questions along with strategic planning. So I think, yeah, looking at the kinds of questions we're asking to get the kind of responses we want is an important part of this process. The linkage questions are okay, you know, I mean, but they're also very open-ended. And so it's the balancing act between like offering some direction, some framework for community members to provide their feedback on, and also soliciting genuine, open feedback from voices we may not have heard, right? Concerns that may not have shown up at the linkage, because they are out there, right? And that's where I see our role as the initiators of any kind of process like this, in that agenda setting component.
I think, oh, go
ahead,
ahead,
I'm
Scott.
sorry.
No, you.
I just don't think it's something we want to rush into either. If we're going to do this, let's do it right and get everybody's input and then move forward. I mean, obviously I think to Dr. Sprague's comment, I don't think we just don't have that time frame to really do it, I believe, correctly, because obviously we got other few things going on, one being a new school. So I don't know. I hope that I think what was brought up is valid on both ends, but I just definitely want to make sure because I think it has to be done no matter what, whether we do it soon or take our time. I want it done correctly is the main thing, and to get everybody's input. And I don't think we want to put the cart before the horse just to get something rolling. I think it's important to have a plan in order to put this out correctly.
Well, that frees up my next 6 months, I'll tell you that.
I'm not sure it does free it up, but I mean,
You're going to be busy.
you're going to be kind of busy still.
This feels reminiscent of when the FAC committee started. It was kind of the same feeling around, like, do we really want the community involved in this before the board has figured out what their priorities are? And I think at the end of the day, one phrase that just replays over in my mind over and over is, how are the communities you serve informing your process? And I think sitting at this board table for a year, 2 years, 3 years, from this perspective, we know how frequently we're trying at least to engage the community. But before we started on the board, remember how what your perception was like of the board's engagement of the community. It was probably pretty different than how we're feeling now, knowing how much we're actually trying to get out there. So I kind of feel like this isn't asking the community to determine our path forward. This is asking the community to help inform the board's decisions around our path forward, very much similar to the FAC process. So now being able to look at that with, 2020 lens, or what's the rear view? Thank you, that old saying. This sounds like a good idea to me.
I agree, I think, with a lot of what you're saying, and I think if we look at it from the kind of the goal, and work backwards and map out what it should look like, thinking that our results policies are not, sacrosanct. Those are not things that will never change based on what's happening in the community, right? And this process should be a way of getting feedback that allows us to reflect on those results policies and to consider whether changes are needed, whether additions, subtractions, whatever it's going to be. It's like it felt like the question initially was, when does the board start, right? But I mean, we're really in it throughout, one way or the other. And if the process is more directed by the board, that's just a different approach to rather convening a steering committee, right? And when we ask for volunteers, people show up. But there was also a significant amount of feedback about the FAC process, for example, about the convening of that group and wanting to try as hard as we can, knowing that it will fail, right, to be fully representative of all our communities. But that's where I would want to invest some time, I think.
I want to, oh, go ahead, Meredith.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the advantage of, I think the thing this document has done is maybe started this conversation of answering that question of when will the board do this, right? So the proposal is November, right? That's when we'll start, amongst ourselves in workshops or whatever, maybe forming these questions differently or thinking about what potential new board members would want to contribute and stuff like that. So I don't know. I mean, I can see that we would tweak things or move things here, but anyway, I appreciate you starting the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to be clear, I'm not precluding public input in the process. I loved the processes we had in the past with the board because it really caused the board to sit down, roll up their sleeves, and really work through some topics and really go back and forth. And people that you thought had one opinion, actually, they came around, they thought it different or saw it differently, or you saw them differently. It brought us as a board closer together as a group. I just found real value in that, really working through these processes, these big topics, and really trying to figure out what do we, like, the district of choice came out of strategic planning. It meant that we wanted to be the district that the people in the community choose, which it's now taken on a different life form, but that was what we meant when we did that. And we really did a lot of work around, do we really mean that? And are we really willing to put the resources and effort behind to make that happen? And I found that robust conversation to be so helpful. The FAC, I have a couple thoughts on it. One is when you bring the community together and you ask people in the community to do a lot of hard work, I felt like they did a lot of hard work and then we kind of didn't follow it. And I wouldn't want that to happen again in the community. I think we all feel that way. I don't think I'm saying something that anybody at the table doesn't feel. So when we do bring them together, how do we do it in a way that makes people feel really valued? There was certainly a lot of pushback about who was picked to be on that. And again, those individuals that were on that committee worked hard. They came to a lot of meetings in the middle of summer when they could be enjoying time with their families. And I just want to make sure that when we ask the community to be involved, we do it in a way that makes them really feel valued. And I agree, our results policies are to be informed by the community. And I think that's why I just want to see the board maybe roll up their sleeves and get a little more involved than to just have one board member on a steering committee that we approve at the end. At least that's how I read this. Maybe I'm
I don't think
perceiving
it
it
says
differently.
that. I mean, yeah.
It says board member.
Just one.
And it also says support staff, singular, teachers, singular. So the point of a steering committee is that you can come to more direction with a smaller group than with a room full of 100 people.
Right.
Right? That doesn't mean they're controlling and directing every single thing.
I'm just looking at the student, like, the role of the different groups on here, and that's just how I read it. And again, I think we as a board agree that this is a good idea. I think we as a board want to maybe figure out what the process is and define the process, I think, because really the direction from this should come from the board, not from the administration, and that's no disparaging against the administration. I think the community expects the role of the board to do that.
That's something I've noticed too in linkages where, going back to the FAC in the past, is that a lot of the teachers in here, they feel as if we're not, we kind of flip-flop around, that we're moving from one area into the next without really being involved in the community, like we're just stamping something at the end. I actually agree. I think this is something which, if we are having a steering committee, I think every single board member should be part of this, be able to make sure that we are with our community.
So just a point on linkages, 95% of those are with our staff alone, not with the community itself. So I don't know that you've had linkages with the community. So that is a piece of it. The second thing is, this is a proposal to Dr. Garcia's point. I was hopeful it would frame up some discussion and think about it in the future. And then what I hear Ms. Sukla, you talking about is kind of more nuts and bolts goals, like what's the action that we're going to take. This would be all before that. So my goal here is simply a vision for the future. It might be as simple as like, we want educational excellence, and it might look like this a little bit. You know, it would have lots of opportunities for kids, high academic choices, all pathways are supported. There might be a piece about people excellence. We want the best humans in our organization. We want the best teachers, the best TAs, the best support staff. We're going to attract and retain those as best we can. And we want the best operational excellence. We want a district that's transparent and engaging with the community. You know, big ideas, big vision stuff. From there, that's where I think the board goes into a workshop and really hammers out, like, what does this mean in our operational expectations? What does this mean for how we administer our school district? And looks at those specific goals. I'm hopeful to get something big, directional, that engages our community in a broad way so that the community feels engaged with the school district and you feel like you have support to make decisions in those areas. It will support our facilities decisions down the road. There might be a referendum someday in the future, and if you know the school district, if its people support high-quality educational spaces, then you can feel confident about decisions in that area. If they never mention facilities, and we're going to spend a bunch of money on facilities, there might be a vision mismatch there, and we need to spend our money on salaries instead. And so I think having that input from our community will give the board and future boards the confidence to move forward. Part of the November to April timeline is 6 months is a long time to get something done, and it would get done within this school board's tenure. It always gets wonky when you have an election and things move on to the next board. I assume any board would support this process, and any candidates that would be running, we would know by January and involve in the process, so hopefully they feel involved. And I think to some of the people's points, I would want board support for this. That was one of the primary weaknesses of the Facility Advisory Committee, is that it was not board initiated. It was something that administration did on behalf of the board. And so by the time we got to an election, it wasn't, as robustly supported as it maybe could have been by the board. And it didn't have the full authority that the board could have given it potentially in that process. And so a minor weakness, but I ultimately think it did its job. So just some context from my perspective, hoping to get kind of above, I think, the work that you're talking about, Ms. Sukla, but maybe I'm wrong.
I'm talking big picture stuff from the board. I think, I don't know what Katie's big picture of what we could do is. I don't know what Tim's big picture of what we could be. And I don't know if we all agree to what that is. I think that if we as a board haven't figured that out, again, I think there's value in us as a board doing some of that.
Somewhere along the line, I mean, there was, I'm going to say 25 years ago, we used to talk about the vision and the goals and so on. And I think now it's become more of something that is measurable. So that if that's our goal, how do we know that we ever got there? Or are we approaching it or not? So I think there has to be some steps in between to say, hey, listen, this was our goal in 2024, and now it's 2030. Have we even gotten close to that? What steps did we take or didn't we take? And so I would like to see some measurable goal, purpose, whatever it is, that we could say, hey, you bet, we're making progress there, or maybe there's some bend in it. We thought that back then, but today things have changed that were not recognizable back in 2024.
Absolutely. I just know that as a building leader and a leader in other areas, when I do stuff without asking the people I serve what their thoughts are, it goes really poorly for me. When I was a building leader and I would say, like, hey, we're doing professional learning communities next week, and I didn't ask my teacher's opinion of it, it didn't go well. When I initiate any initiative a school district has ever had, if we didn't get the support of the folks that we serve in the first place, it's really challenging to implement. And so that's the idea behind this, is asking the people we serve, our community, to understand what their vision is so that we can implement that with fidelity and confidence. And I don't think it precludes the individual views of the board members here on what that looks like, because you're more knowledgeable, you're in the weeds on a daily basis. I see these vision statements as being relatively high level, those pillars being, maybe comprehensive, but, non-specific, and really leading the board into that weeds part, that like, what do you think, what does educational excellence mean to you? What does operational excellence mean to you? What does it mean when they said they want our students to be creative? What does that mean in terms of our policy that we put in place? So that's my advocacy for a district visioning process. It gives us the moral authority to move forward. Without it, I will feel like I'm flailing just a little bit as we move forward with some of these decisions.
Do you envision staff as part of that?
Absolutely. Yep, focus groups, surveys, interviews, open houses. Absolutely, our staff will be a part of it.
Should be a big part, I would hope, yes.
And I feel like what we've seen in the past is that the board's ideas change and evolve as they gather that information from staff and hear it. So I don't know, we could talk in circles for 6 or 8 months about what we think, but until we start getting that information, it doesn't really, that's really what changes our direction.
Correct.
More than arguing with each other.
I've been a part of a lot of strategic planning processes over the years, and my favorite ones that I think have led to the most impactful strategic plans as a result have been those that have started with this exact thing. Focus groups, surveys of the people you serve, things that help give you some meat to start off with and lead into your board discussions around the actual plan. Just for
Well,
that.
without objection, I'm going to cut this conversation short because it is 7:45. We're ending this at 8. We have facility planning yet to discuss. Mr. Levina is here. Part of his presentation is about the board preliminary schedule for the new school, which our community is very interested in. So unless there's objection, I'd like to move us on to the next agenda item. So is there objection?
We'll bring it back next time if that's all right.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Levina. We'll turn it over to you for the facility planning conversation. And just so you know, and for the board to know, at 8 o'clock, I will adjourn. So if it's in the middle of your presentation or in the middle of questions, we'll come back to it at the next board meeting.
No problem. I will be very brief. Do you have a copy to send to everybody? It's up. Okay. First of all, I want to congratulate the board on a referendum that passed. I think it sends a strong message to our community when we have a unified board that comes up with a plan, and certainly that was the end result of the vote. And so thank you to the board, thank you to the community, because this is exciting. I tell our staff to be a part of this. We're really right-sizing the district and putting us in a great position over the next 20, 30 years as it relates to our facilities. And so thank you to the board for that. What I'm going to do is just kind of give you a brief, and I know that the superintendent has shared with you an outline of kind of the schedule, preliminary schedule that we're working from. And so I just want to go through that briefly and address some of the issues along the way. And so when we look at the Hogan move to Central, we're in the design phase. We're starting to work with Bray Architects in that design. We've met with several departments, bigger departments here at Hogan. We've talked through this process for a while now, so we're in that process with them. We would look at putting everything together and bringing back any bids that we would have in approximately April, but we would be looking at spending capital improvement dollars, so 25, 26 capital improvement dollars for any improvements that we would need over there. One of the things that you need to know is we've been working toward this for a while. Our main server room comes out of this building. And so when we built the office out at Central, we prepared and we built a server room that would be ready for us when the time came that we had to move. Knowing certainly whether Hogan moved there or not, that's where our main server room for the district would be. And so we've been preparing for that. And so that main server room was paid through for capital improvement dollars. Also, we're in the process right now of moving the generator over to there. The generator as a backup for all of our server and technology information. We're in the process for that. You approved that budget. That was in the 23-24 capital improvement budget. Again, knowing that we're going to need to leave this at some point. And then what we would be looking at is once we do those improvements, we would do them over the year, and then we'd be moving over there at some time in October would probably be the last part of that. There's a reason for October that it has to happen by. Because if we're going to start the new school, and we'll talk about that when we get there, we're going to have to tear down demo this building in preparation to start the very next year of building the new school. And I'll address that as we go. When we look at State Road Addition, we start the design phase now. We've had some preliminary drawings. I have process there for you for a reason. You need to understand that we will have a process where staff will be involved in the design of that building. When we built Hamilton, for instance, staff were included in that process. We will do the same thing here. They'll have input. I've asked the principals what teachers, what classrooms we're doing, what grade level will they be, so that we can start that process of giving them input in this process. So that's why the term process is there. We've already started the process of doing a site survey and soil sampling so that we can continue with the building process. So we're trying to do those things right now. As soon as it passed, we started preparing for them so we can be ready when the weather permits and we can start building the school. We would hope to be doing the planning and then put out for a bid in mid-August. And we want to do that in mid-August for a reason, so that we can have, number one, we can get good pricing when we start doing that. And so we want to do that. The construction then would start in September. And we would primarily be doing the gymnasium as we do that, because that would be less disruption for our students. We're looking at doing the classroom addition, which will mainly be on the second floor. So we would start that sometime in the spring through the summer. And so most of the building would be ready in 2026, the beginning of 2026, even though we wouldn't be moving any students over there. I put on here the MTU bus stop. If you remember, in a lot of the discussions, we talked about having public transportation. We started that process several years ago with the MTU, and so now we will be started planning that even more so. They say it takes about 2 years to put in place redoing their routes, and so they're well aware of this, and so we'll start that communication as well. When we look at the new school at the Hogan site, we would start doing that process as well. We will include people inside that. We haven't determined what that process will be, but at the north side, for instance, we had a design committee that worked on the big picture items, and I know the board was involved in that as well. And then we had met with every single staff member that was going to be in that school by grade level at least twice in the design of that process. We want to do something similar, so there'll be input from there. And then we also, and when we did that, we communicated with the community. What did they want to see in their community school? And so that process has not been designed yet, but we'll be putting that in place and want input from other people. We will also start doing soil sampling here. We'll be doing some testing. We'll want to see where the water table is, because in the design, we said that we would do geothermal, and that would be our hope. And so we'll be doing some of that sampling in preparation for that when we do that. In December, we'll be meeting with the city department heads on several issues. We'll be looking at combining parcels. This parcel is made up, our property is made up of 4 different parcels. And so when you do construction, you have to combine those parcels, so you can't build over one. So we'll be combining those. That's kind of a legal term. We'll talk about demolition, because currently you can't demo until you have a building permit. And so we'll want to work with the city on that, even though we won't have a building permit yet, because we won't have a design. And so we'll be asking to demo the building before we have that building permit, knowing full well the public has supported this, the board has decided we're going to build the school, so we'll be working with that. We'll look at utilities, where they'll come into the new location. We have to vacate Winnebago Street. The city owns, even though we've been taking care of this property for years and years and years, they own the right-of-way for a street through the middle of the property. They primarily kept that, and I understand why. If we were going to sell the property, it gives them a little bit more control. But now that we'll be using that, we'll have to vacate that. And then in the budget for the new school, we had a traffic impact study. And so we'll start working with the city. They do a better job of that than we do. And so we'll start working with the city doing a traffic impact, how it impacts our neighborhood. We hope to put that out for bid in December of 2025, and then construction start in March of 26. And so everything we're doing now is a lot of preparation, so those things happen, so everything runs smoothly, and then we're able to open up the new school in September of '27 or August of '27. Ironically enough, when we built the Northside Elementary School, we were not able to work with the city and get the demo permit for the new school, so we did the demo of the old Roosevelt building in September.
Franklin.
Actually, it was the first day of school in September.
Franklin building.
Oh, Franklin, thank you. And then we were able to start school. We built the school in 11 months in one of the coldest winters. We don't want to have to do that again.
It was an awful winter.
It was an awful winter. We don't want to have to do that again. We have some leeway here. And so hopefully that will give us plenty of time to move into the building and be ready a month before the building's school is ready to start. So that's a rough estimate of what's going to happen, but a lot of things are happening in place starting right now as soon as we pass the referendum. So again, thank you to the community, thank you to the board members, and I'll ask if you have any questions. I tried to do that real quickly.
So we have about 6 minutes left,
Yep.
and so maybe we'll just stick with this topic, and we
Okay.
can bring long-range facility planning at the next board meeting?
Okay.
All right, so
Sounds
I
good.
saw Ms. Bergedal, Dr. Sprague, and Mr. Bagneski. Do you have a question as well? Okay.
Where are we going?
That's a good question. Right now, we're looking at Central High School, and so we're looking at seeing where we can put that in there. We have not decided that, so that will be part of the planning process.
Okay, because
Yep.
it will not go in the auditorium with how things are set up right now.
Okay.
No, we would be looking at like a flexible learning space
Yes.
where we'd have
Okay.
modular tables and chairs that we'd be able to use for PD during the day and set up for a board meeting in the evening. We don't use this space regularly. We wouldn't
Right.
want to just dominate some sort of space there, and the auditorium is used so frequently, we wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to
Yeah, we
use
would,
that.
yeah, we wouldn't be able to use that. And what's
Okay.
really, we want to design a place that's easy for the community to use. We need meeting space. We're short of meeting space at Hogan right
Yeah.
now. And so when we do the design, we'll use flexible spaces to do
Great,
that.
so we're not considering the central auditorium.
No,
No,
we
great.
could
Thank
not with
goodness.
show choir and everything else. And then
Yeah.
it's not a really, and even this isn't the greatest setup, right? For community members to come and talk to.
I'm so
to
tired
board
of the
members.
public sitting at our feet.
Yes,
If we could
yeah.
just be eye to eye, this would be lovely.
Yeah.
That is the goal.
Always hated that.
Yeah, that is the plan.
Dr.
Yes.
Sprague?
I think you said this, I just wanted to confirm that in those processes of design and building it and learning the lessons, are we going to be making sure that we're including in particular for the new elementary, the staff of Northside and some of the lessons learned and what they like about that build and?
Yeah, I think there's some lessons learned. That building was built 10 years ago, right? So we learned from that process. And I think our architect brings new ideas as well to the whole process, but we will look at that. Absolutely.
I think one of the best lessons that we heard about was don't make the lockers flat on top. Because you will have children on them.
Yes. Well, it's really interesting because when we designed that school, like I said, we met with every staff member, but the turnover's been so great. So the people who actually designed the school aren't there any longer. So something else to kind of remember as you go through the process.
Mr. Bagneski, do you have a question?
Well, I have not necessarily a question, but I still would like to have an in-depth discussion of moving Hogan to Central. I just feel, according to even the long-range plan, that there's something to the effect that we'll have middle schools in the high schools, and if that ever happens, then we move Hogan out to another site. I think that money could be served. I do think that when people talk about middle school with the high school, whatever grades, 7 through 12, 6 through 12, I have, I believe, 3 articles here that you could look, and one of the points they make is that the fewer jumps that a student has to make in school, the transitions, like for instance, right now they go from PK to 6, or 5, then they go 6 to 8. If you can eliminate one of those transitions, the behavior of the kids and the academic achievement of the kids are improved. And so you can read those articles. I try to base what I say not only on my own thoughts, but I also see that those connections can be made. The behavioral issues, if a kid is in this school from, let's say, 6th grade through 12th grade, people identify with the kid and try to help him all the way through. He's not all of a sudden, or she's not all of a sudden going to a new school. You get to follow kids through a longer period of time. And I think, according to the articles that are here, that would be well worth our investigation. And this may be too far down the road, but I hope not.
I guess my one comment would be, this is based on the premise that we're going to be out of this building next October. So anything that we would do, decisions would be made fairly soon, because we're starting the process of spending capital improvement dollars. So I just caution that.
And I understand.
Yeah.
That's why I felt it
Yeah.
paramount
Yeah.
for me to say something tonight.
Yeah.
I do think when you talk about other options, we still have Spence and Hinchin that may work out. So
Yep.
why couldn't we move into one of those buildings rather than whatever we're going to plan on doing with those buildings? But I think those would be good sites, and that would save us down the road.
Could we have this agenda item?
No, that's all right. I know it's close, so I'm, what Jim had brought up, that was my question, and I'll make it quick, because then hopefully she has it. Was this decision already made that we're moving Hogan? Because I'm to Central, because in all the meetings we talked about, we weren't sure yet that was an option, but now it seems to be the case. And if so, he brought up some points, but I think the public has been pretty stern on wanting us to get rid of those schools, period, and get rid of the cost of them, so I hope we don't bring it to them. But I just wanted to know if that is a sure thing now, Hogan to Central, because that wasn't the case beforehand.
Well, when I brought it up previously, it was not part of the referendum, was the comment back.
Ms. Sukla.
It's 8 o'clock. I was just going to ask that this agenda item be on action next time so we could possibly discuss it. Mr. Bagneski's concern.
We'll look at that. So it is 8 o'clock. So again,
Okay.
Mr. Levine, if we could have you come back at the next meeting to discuss the long-range piece, that would be fantastic.
No problem.
All
Thank
right,
you very much.
We are adjourned. So before we move on, though, I need to read a statement since we are moving to closed session.
Why was this noted this way and
Excuse me
not-
for a second. The La Crosse Board of Education will consider a motion to move into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 19.85 Sub 1 Sub A to deliberate concerning a case which is the subject of a judicial or quasi-judicial trial or hearing before the governmental body, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 19.85 Sub 1 Sub F for the purpose of considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations, to wit, discuss recent incident at Central High School. So is there a motion to adjourn to closed session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
So moved by Ms. Berkedal, seconded by Dr. Garcia. To move into closed session, you had a comment, Ms. Sukla.
Why is this hidden in the adjournment portion of the agenda versus noted as closed session like it is in every other agenda?
It was noted on the agenda, it is part of the agenda, so it was not hidden. I do not appreciate that comment, but we will move forward. Thank you so much. Is there another comment? Hearing none. All those in favor, I need a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Alberts?
Aye.
Mr. Bagneski?
Aye.
Ms. Berkedal? Aye. Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Manka?
Nay.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Nay.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye. Motion is carried, and where will we be meeting? Is it
209.
209? Thank you very much. We will move to 209.
Do our high school students come with us?
No.
My question was appropriate.